1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have you ever played hide and go seek as a kid or even as an adult? The mystery of the game, if you weren't it, was where to hide. And if you were it, the mystery was to find where everyone was hiding, right? Especially mysterious if played at night. Bible Sleuth here, and today I'm on a truly mysterious parable that oddly includes kids. I have to admit that this one I've struggled understanding, which may be why I've heard few sermons on it. Or maybe that's because some don't consider it one of the parables. Anyway, Jesus had a point to make. So, as we investigate this parable found both in Luke 7 and Matthew 11, I do so honestly knowing that he that hath an ear, let him hear. So let's dive in, searching out this mysterious parable of the children in the market. Normally, we head to the scene, but in this case, I think we should go back in time to flesh out a bit of background. So, what happened? Jesus was approached by two of John the Baptist's followers who were sent by John to ask, "Are you the one, or should we look for another?" It is very likely that John had been imprisoned by this time and realized he wasn't getting out alive. I'm also wondering if he wanted reassurance that he had fulfilled his call. He knew Jesus was the one because he had been told ahead of time about it. Here's what I mean. Look at John 1:30 through 32, and this time in the ESV. This is the one I meant when I said, "A man who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me." Actually, John was probably a few months older than Jesus, but he said he was before me. I think that is a critical statement. Verse 31 says, "I myself did not know him, but the reason I came baptizing with water was that he might be revealed to Israel." Then John gave this testimony. "I saw the Spirit come down from heaven as a dove and remain on him." Remember, that event took place at Jesus' baptism, which occurred prior to his ministry origin. This is why I don't believe John was necessarily questioning if Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus responded by saying in Matthew 11, 5 through 6, "The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. Lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." This is a direct quote of the prophecy spoken by Isaiah chapter 35, which you should check out. It goes on to possibly refer to future events when Jesus sets up his kingdom on this earth in the millennial reign. It also is interesting that he referred to Isaiah, as we will see. With that, they were sent away, and Jesus went on talking to those listening about John, contrasting him to unlikely things. Now let's head to the scene in Matthew 11. 7 through 12. "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing? Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, 'Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you.'" So was Jesus validating that John was a fulfillment of Isaiah 43, who would prepare the way of the Lord? Of course he was. He goes further in Matthew 17:12 and associates John as a type of Elijah. But let's get back to Matthew 11. "Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist, yet the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force." And I think I'm going to stop there. This last verse might be considered one of Jesus' hard sayings. I have to say, I've heard sermons that confuse this verse with advancing the kingdom of God. However, I have a question. Could he really have been alluding to John's arrest, but also prophesying persecution and martyrdom of John himself and many of the people in the church? Key things that point to this view are what is the kingdom? It's hearts of the believers, right? But in the eyes of the ones who wanted to steal it, it was about power, position, wealth. That's a scary similarity to people of today, isn't it? And the second point is the word used for take, harpazo, which means to snatch or steal. Violent men are attempting to steal the kingdom by killing believers, beginning with John. A perspective. During the time of the prophets, the kingdom was still coming. Beginning with John, the kingdom was at hand. Unfortunately for John, he would not see the day of Pentecost, when the fulfillment of Joel 2 and the kingdom would then dwell within the believer. He wouldn't see it because violent men were trying to steal the kingdom. Maybe this portion of scripture is a possible connection that is made between these two cousins. The distance of that relationship is unknown, and some would argue that that is an inconsistency in the Bible. How could Mary and Elizabeth be cousins when it clearly states in Matthew that Mary was from the tribe of Judah, while Elizabeth was clearly from the tribe of Levi? But the argument can be made that the connection to the tribes came from the father, so that genealogically Mary was from the tribe of Levi on her mom's side, but from the Davidic line from her dad. Why is this important? Read Hebrews 7, Psalms 110:4. Genesis 14:17 through 24. In those verses, we meet a mysterious king of Salem. And the connection to both tribes points to an order, the order of Melchizedek. Through Mary, Jesus was in line for both the throne and the priesthood. Through God the Father, Jesus had no beginning or end. Fully God, fully man, a priest and a king. Belief in this is fundamental to our faith. Zechariah was from the tribe of Levi, a direct descendant of Aaron. He was in the priestly order of Abijah and was serving at the time that he was told that Elizabeth would bear a son way past her time of having children. Because of this, that mantle should have been passed down to John. It was why there was contention about John's name when he was born. But what went ye out to see? A prophet? Yea, I say unto you, and more than a prophet. This was true in more than one case, because John knew who he was and what his purpose was as well, and he took that very seriously. Now for the parable. Look what Jesus says in verses 16 through 19. But to what shall I compare this generation? It is like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling to their playmates. We played for the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not mourn. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds. So what does this have to do with hide and seek? Here is what I'm wondering. Could it be that the stories of the kids calling to each other in the market was actually a familiar game kids played at that time? And what if these games had names like wedding or funeral? If you think about it, kids were not considered prominent people by any means during this time. Remember how the disciples tried to rebuke the parents and the kids that were brought to Jesus? He responded that they should not do that because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such of these. I find that interesting, don't you? To support this, Jesus and John's lives were totally invisible for almost 30 years. The exception is a brief window into Jesus' earlier life when he was left in the temple at the age of 12. Kids had very little to do with the traditional ceremonies, except for two: weddings and funerals. So such a game was plausible because it was something they were more than cultural spectators of. So if these were familiar games, Jesus used them to illustrate the generations. response to someone who was not willing to play their games. Neither John or Jesus were willing to play, and so they would more than likely suffer some sort of retribution for their lack of participation. And guess what? They did. Remember, John rebuked the Pharisees and Sadducees, saying, "O generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" Notice the word used, generation. Does that sound familiar? The words used are actually not quite the same, but the effect is very similar. As far as the kids in the marketplace, Jesus was pointing to both John's and his own persecution and even executions. There's one last thing that Jesus said that was very interesting, and it was this: "But wisdom is justified of her children." I haven't noted this in any of the other videos related to Jesus' parables, but there is an interesting similarity to many of his parables and references that can be found in the wisdom literature. Who are the children of this generation? Proverbs 8:32 through 36 possibly has wisdom talking to her children, saying, "And now, O sons, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Hear instruction and be wise, and do not neglect it. Blessed is the one who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death." Whether the sons of children are of men or of wisdom herself, it's not clear. Having gone through Proverbs many times, I see this comparison of a woman called Wisdom, or transliterated Kokma. She is contrasted throughout the book of Proverbs with an adulterous woman who is classified by her foolishness, and we must avoid her at all cost. If my analysis is correct, and Jesus is loosely referring to Proverbs, then he is comparing the children in the marketplace to the children of the adulterous woman associated with the foolish. Look at the two verses that I didn't mention in the above section, Matthew 11:14 through 15. "And if you will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear." Now look at Proverbs 20:11 through 12. "Even a child is known by his doings, whether his work be pure, and whether it be right. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them." Do those few verses sound similar? If they couldn't believe that John was who he said he was, then they wouldn't believe who Jesus was either. John recognized him as coming before, and yet Jesus compared John to Elias, who would prepare the way. There's so much here. At 15 minutes, can't even scratch the surface. What is important, though? Is it the connection between John and Jesus? I think he alluded to that importance. It really doesn't matter, because even the least of the kingdom is greater than he. But is that what he was saying? I'm not under the impression that the least is better than John. What I believe is that even the least is as important in the kingdom. Satan and violent men want to steal, kill, and destroy the kingdom, but wisdom is justified by her children. The parallels to today's generation is uncanny, as if Jesus could look forward through time to see how things are right now. And of course, he could, which gives a perspective of how the wise should behave. Our culture is piping dances and singing laments, wondering why true believers are not playing the game. The truth is, many claiming to believe they are playing the game. These are like the young man seduced by the folly of the adulterous woman in Proverbs 7. He was unaware that her house leads to the grave. The children of this generation are similarly unaware. Like Jesus and John, even when faced with death, It's important to not play the world's game. When we have done all that we can do to stand, we must stand, therefore, putting on the whole armor of God.